So let's turn to Peter Frankopan, who's a professor of global history at Oxford University, and also has a global podcast. I've been thinking with Peter Frankopan. I'll reference two of his many books: The Silk Roads, A New History of the World, and The New Silk Roads, The Future and Present of the World, which leads me neatly into my first question. What, as you see it, is the future of that part of the world as a result of what we've heard from President Putin this morning? Professor, good morning.
Morning, Nick. Well, it's not just about that part of the world. I think we're all on the hook now. I think what's very interesting about Putin's announcement is first the kind of apocalyptic tones in which he has painted what he thinks is going on, and there are all sorts of reasons I think why Putin is trying to escalate because of the series of massive miscalculations that he's made since the beginning of the year, and it's put him personally and the Russian Federation in an extremely tight spot. So those of your listeners who will remember their history will remember that about 100 years ago, the Tsar Nicholas I ordered what was called a partial mobilization to sort of show that Russia had muscles and teeth and was willing to use them. And the problem is when you start to put all of your troops on standby, you start to pull people out of their day jobs and send them to the front and give them training. You have to respond in different ways. You spoke to your previous guest from about NATO's perspective, but as it's happened about 5 minutes ago, the Chinese Press Association have put out an announcement saying that Chinese are putting their forces in East Asia on high alert. So these are extremely difficult and dangerous times to be able to try and read the tea leaves. And I think we need to have quite a calm head to make sure that we're making sure that we're really understanding what Putin's actually trying to say and do.
Politically, how secure is Vladimir Putin at this time, Professor?
Well, there's been no wobbles for the last 7 or 8 months, which would tell you a lot. In fact, there've been no wobbles for the last 25 years with Putin. So we might all think that there's a moment where people are going to pull him to one side and say his time's up and could he go and retreat to his villa on the Black Sea. It doesn't look like that there's any problems about Putin standing inside Russia. And in fact, all the polls that we can see from the kind of the data we can scrape together and with all the caveats that you need, Putin looks like he's extremely popular. That the stuff with Ukraine is not new this year. The stuff about Russia and the West that Putin spoke about extensively this morning is not new. It's all about a story that's been bedded into Russian consciousness for the last couple of decades, which is that the West are trying to undermine Russia. This is all about it's not about Ukraine. This is about Russia being taken apart by NATO, by the West, by the European Union, by the United States. And a lot of people in Russia believe that story. And, it's very hard to put that genie back in the bottle.
Much of the coverage of the West indicates that he, Putin, is losing the war. What do you perceive as the reality?
Well, he has lost the war. I mean, he lost the war the moment he invaded Ukraine, not only because of the territorial gains and the things that we've watched in particularly the last few weeks of military setbacks. He lost the war because he assumed that the West looked disjointed, and perhaps not unreasonably. We've had Brexit here. We've had the rise of far right and far left in many countries across Europe. The United States with Biden Trump has been deeply divided. The pull out of Afghanistan, the problems in the Middle East. You could understand why he might think that we in the West are struggling. Macron called NATO brain dead. So I think he thought opportunistically this would be a moment where the West would fragment, and he achieved exactly the opposite, which is we put our differences to one side. We managed to put our shoulders to the grindstone and pull things together. But I think it's not a coincidence that Putin didn't make this announcement last night, when most of us who watch Russia were told to expect an announcement at 8 o'clock last night, or 6 o'clock UK time. He's made this announcement while the entire EU, UK, NATO and Western leadership are asleep in America, because Prime Minister is there at the moment for the United Nations General Assembly. So it's bought him a few hours of time where any kind of response back to people in the West were all fast asleep, and that is all done deliberately to try and catch us off guard. And what Putin's talking about the nuclear threat, he's not just saying that the Russians are going to use this or might use this. He's saying that the Russia will have to use it because of the Western nuclear blackmail. And we find that almost impossible to understand how the Russians can think that we are somehow to blame for this, because after all, it was Putin's decision to invade Ukraine that set this whole process in motion. But we need to have some pretty significant efforts to try to unpick this, because the situation is about as bleak as it could be.
And finally, what should the response be from NATO, the United Kingdom, the United States?
Well, the problem with all these confrontations we have right now, whether it's with Russia, whether it's with other potential rivals and competitors, is our lines of communication are extremely slim. It doesn't help that in this country, we've had 10 days of mourning for Her Majesty that has basically shut down lots of the apparatus of government. We've got a brand new Foreign Secretary, brand new Prime Minister, brand new cabinet. So, you need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to have ambassadorial contacts through the Foreign Office. You need to have all the channels of communication open, including for some very painful and difficult conversations. And we, I think, here in the UK haven't invested in those bilateral relationships with our friends as well as with our rivals and competitors. And that means right now we need to be having the phone lines going. We need to have people on airplanes proposing summits, trying to meet people, trying to see what are the things we can take off the table. How do we find a way of trying to reconcile and work out what it is that Putin can get and what it is that he can't.
Fascinating speaking with you. Thank you. And I hope I haven't inconvenienced you by asking you to hold on this morning. Peter Frankopan is Professor of Global History at Oxford University. He's also an author and hosts the global podcast I've Been Thinking with Peter Frankopan.